Welcome to Thursday, October 29th, 2020. Well, we're going to wrap up October and head into November with a quiet stretch of weather, folks. Moderating temperatures over the next couple of days. We have a weak cold front that'll come through the region Friday night and Saturday. It's going to bring slightly cooler temperatures for Halloween, some wind, but really it's not much of a system at all. And then we're going to go into next week with high pressure dominating, more of a west to east jet stream flow, nothing really going on. Now, we're still expecting November 8th through the 12th to bring a round of cold and snow to the western United States and more of a wintry pattern. But we've got a good 7 or 8 days here coming where there won't be much going on. We'll talk some more about La Niña and also bring up some solar topics as we go through this podcast. Here we are today with the jet stream. Here's the storm that rolled through over the weekend. The hurricane, what's left of it, is getting absorbed by this low, and we'll see a lot of bad weather up in this area today. High pressure building across the western states. This is the cold front through Saturday. We have the high pressure off the eastern Pacific, and then that's going to drive a little shot of cooler air coming through. But this front has very little moisture with it. But there will be some gusty winds and some cooler air coming in behind it for Friday night and Saturday. Any shower activity will be mountain snow showers up into Montana, northern Wyoming. That's all. And then we're going to go into next week with a zonal west-east flow across the nation, moderating temperatures and really not bringing much in the way in terms of any weather for most of the week next week. But for you keen observers, you're noticing a big storm up in the Gulf of Alaska. Now, we always talk about we have to have a ridge in the Gulf of Alaska to get us stormy here. So you are correct. However, this ridge building up here and up behind this, you can't see it, is an upper level low that's going to be a kicker that's going to kick this guy to the south and east. There it is by next weekend. The ridge then comes into the Gulf of Alaska, and we've got this deep trough forecasted to come into the western United States by next weekend and beyond. This could actually be bringing rain and snow to California and a lot of the Intermountain West and western United States. So take advantage of this break in the weather that's coming, because odds are getting more and more favorable that next weekend colder wet weather is going to return. Couple of interesting things to show you. This is the snow so far in North America, snow cover across the North American continent as of earlier this week, as of the 27th. 2021, this is the red line. Notice we're far ahead in North American snow cover for 2021, going all the way back to 2005 and 2006. Now, you might say after that very warm first half of October we've had, how could that be? Well, while it was so warm and dry in the lower 48 states, it was snowing like crazy up in Canada and up in the higher latitudes to our north. So the snow cover in the North American continent is actually above average for the last 15 years so far. Now, let's talk about La Niña and El Niño. We talk about it a lot because it has such a big impact on our weather. And I want to show you some things that are really showing up this season so far that are just textbook La Niña. Up in the upper left-hand corner here, we have your typical El Niño. El Niño is when the tropical Pacific is warmer than average. The jet stream tends to take more of a southern route, and you tend to have more wet conditions across the country with that more southerly route for the jet stream. In the La Niñas, the jet stream is more locked up in the northern areas, and you take on a pattern like this. And so it really alters the way the jet stream behaves and where it brings in the water, where it brings in the storms. In a typical La Niña pattern, that jet stream tends to be more north, the coldest conditions, and this is exactly what we've seen so far. The coldest weather tends to be locked up in the more northern latitudes. You have a wet pattern in the Pacific Northwest. The southern plains tend to be dry, and you get the clippers. You get a more active, colder pattern in the northern plains and the Great Lakes. What I want to highlight here is right here, variable polar stream. What does that mean? Well, it means that the jet stream can go through these high levels of variability during the course of a La Niña season. Now let's take a look at the variability that you get in a La Niña. And I want you to think about what has happened so far this fall, because it really explains where we've had these long stretches of warmer than drier than normal conditions. Then all of a sudden we have an Arctic outbreak. What you tend to see in a La Nina pattern is a more west to east jet stream flow for some longer periods. So what that does tend to do is bring in milder Pacific air, giving us above average temperatures, which is exactly what we had in late September and for the first 3 weeks of October. You had this jet stream that was more to the north and more west to east and wasn't taking big dips. But you then get this high variability in a La Nina where all of a sudden the jet stream will amplify. You get that ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, then the Arctic air pours south into the United States. We have had 2 episodes of this. The early September Arctic outbreak, which was amazing, and then this big record-breaking Arctic outbreak that just happened. And you know what's going to happen this week, in the coming week? We're going to go west to east with the jet stream flow, and then what happens next weekend? Well, we see the jet stream buckle and it releases the Arctic air again in about 7 to 10 days from now. And this is something that's likely going to repeat itself early this winter season as we go into November and December. So the seesaw kind of back and forth is likely going to continue in the coming, let's say, 1 to 2 months. And a lot of long-range weather forecasting, folks, is not computer modeling. It's looking at patterns that have occurred in the past, identifying them, and applying those patterns to what you think is going to happen in the future when the weather patterns are similar. And this year we've got a strong La Nina, which is no surprise that we have a La Nina because we're at the solar minimum. We just bottomed out with the solar minimum, and let's get to the solar activity. Now, I want to show you we've had an uptick here lately in sunspot activity. The solar minimum has been reached. We should now see more sunspots and more activity on the sun. Despite that, for 2020, we've had 204 days of no sunspots, which is almost 7 out of 10 days of the year. And look at the 3 years in a row here, really 4 years in a row, of low sunspot activity. So this is a solar minimum of the magnitude we haven't seen in a while. When you get sunspots, when they start to reappear and you get into a more active solar cycle, which is going to be happening, there's a lag time where it affects the weather and the climate. It's not instantaneous. You don't get a sunspot and then see the weather change. It takes a while. It's usually 2, 3, 4 years for the activities with the cosmic rays and these solar fluctuations to really make an impact. It's not one of these things that happens immediately. Case in point, we're looking at sunspots, some big ones returning, but the influx of cosmic rays is still very, very high. And if you look at this graph, cosmic ray activity coming off the sun is extremely high. And guess what? You go back to 2009 and 2010, the last solar minimum, it was very high as well. So when you get more sunspots, your cosmic rays decrease. As you get less sunspots, they go back up again. And that's where the climate connection is. But it takes a while. There's a lag time. It's not instantaneous. Thanks for watching and listening to the Day Weather Podcast. We'll talk to you on Friday.